Welcome to the Free Library of Philadelphia Online. My name is Jason Freeman, and I'm a producer and editor here in the Free Library's Other Events Office, and it's my honor to be here to introduce tonight's author. Acclaimed Kenyan scholar and writer Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o is the author of the novels A Grain of Wheat, Weep Not Child, and Petals of Blood, among several other works of nonfiction, memoirs, children's books, and essays. The distinguished professor of English and comparative literature and the director of the International Center for Writing and Translation at the University of California, Irvine. Very hard to fit on a business card. He has been awarded 12 honorary doctorates, was nominated for the Man Booker Prize, and is annually tipped to win the Nobel Prize in Literature. He has received wide acclaim from the likes of the New York Times Book Review, The Guardian, and former President Barack Obama. He is here tonight with The Perfect Nine, the epic of Gikuyu and Mũmbi. Written as a verse narrative, it blends folklore, mythology, adventure, and allegory into the origin story of the Gikuyu people of Kenya. The New Yorker calls it a, quote, sinuous retelling, spun as an epic poem rivaling the Iliad in body count and surpassing it in whimsy. I love that, Ruth. Tonight's author is in conversation with Ketu H. Katrak, professor in the Department of Drama at the University of California, Irvine. She was the founding chair of the Department of Asian American Studies at UCI, and prior to that, taught at the University of Massachusetts Amherst and Yale. She is also the author of the forthcoming book, J. Pather, Performance and Spatial Politics in South Africa. Folks, the screen is all yours.
And Ketu, thank you. Good to see you again.
Yes, definitely. So thank you, Ngũgĩ. I am really honored to serve as an interlocutor, really, for your comments and for your readings. So first of all, I want to thank you for all your work. In all your work, you speak truth to power, something that we all aspire to. And in your dramas, in your essays, memoir, and now in this verse epic, The Perfect Nine. So it's a beautifully written story. It's already very well received. Jason read one review, and it's also described as a triumph of the form of the epic. And so I think it's a major achievement for you. It's described as using simple language that lays bare deep truths. And it showcases also, I think, your special talent in illuminating, indeed, in engaging passionately with Gikuyu culture, traditions, and history. So this is the first epic that is written in the Gikuyu language, that is your mother tongue. And an epic usually has adventure, drama, laughter. It also teaches certain values, moral values of family, love, courage. So I wanted to ask you, first of all, about the epic form and what attracted you, to create these characters, the encounters, and telling us the origin story of Gikuyu and Mũmbi. So what is it about the epic that attracted you to this form?
First of all, let me say, first of all, in the introduction, by the way, Jason said I was a director of the International Center for Writing and Translation. I'm the founding director, but I'm no longer director. It's being directed by somebody else right now. Yeah, and it's going strong. Yeah, yes, the epic form. Oh my God, yeah. First of all, let me say that the story on which my epic is based is actually a story which has been told to virtually every Gikuyu child. And it's the myth of the origins of the Gikuyu people. Everybody in the world, let me say this, most communities in the world, most peoples have a myth of origin. Of course, one of the best known all over is one of the Jewish myths of origins, about Adam and Eve. Yeah? Gikuyu people have their own version, well, not a version, they have original man and woman, who is Gikuyu, the man, and Mũmbi, the woman. And they say that the legend, as we were told as children, is that they had only 9 daughters. Yeah, or actually 10, but they always said 9 or full 9. Hence the idea of the perfect 9 becomes actually literally 10. And they had no brothers, or presumably no eligible men around. But anyway, God went back to the mountain, Mount Kenya, the mountain of the moon, and he talked with God. And the following morning, there were 9 handsome young men. So after that follows the myth of origins. I'll tell later my additions, by my interpretation, but that the basic story is there. So when you write when you base your interpretation on a myth which is well known, there are things you cannot change.
Yes.
Yeah. There must be Gikuyu in our case, and the woman Mũmbi, and their names are the same name. You can't give them different names, okay? And there were 9 daughters who are the founding matriarchs of the 10 Gikuyu clans. And again, you cannot change that, no matter how you interpret it, okay? Yeah.
Yes.
But how did I come to it? 2 things. I must say I was actually, first, in terms of the drama of what's happening, it was actually, I was somewhere along the Pacific Ocean. And as Ketu and I know, we live very near, we live on University Hills of the University of California, which is literally about 5 to 10 miles to get to the Pacific Ocean. And one time I was being by the ocean side, and sort of the vastness of the Pacific Ocean. I don't know why, out of the blue, it brought back the Gikuyu myth of origins. Yeah.
Right.
But around that, I had actually been reading quite a lot of epics. I've been involved in epics. I'm a student of English, so I have read, of course, Odyssey and the Iliad of Word of Homer. Yeah. But recently, I've also become very preoccupied with the Indian epics. Mahabharata, or Mahabharata specifically, there was Mahabharata, of course, and Ramayana are some of the 2 greatest, sort of epics in the world, but they are of Sanskrit origins in terms of language in which they were composed. And even more recently, I was reading another one from Catalonia in Spain. Yeah, they have, it's called Canigo, I think. Yeah, based on the Mount Canigo, which Canigo has a lot of snow on top. When I looked at that, I remembered also Mount Kenya has permanent snow on top. That's why it's called the mountain of the moon. Okay. So I think all those factors, the vastness of the Pacific Ocean, and and the fact I've been reading all those epics and so on, I think all those things came together.
Yeah, because this, I think of it as your only creative work that has nothing to do with colonialism, because colonialism didn't exist at the time. So it's really a true kind of pre-colonial reality of the origin story that you're recreating. And that's also a beautiful contribution, from in terms of your whole repertoire of all the works that you have done.
The only contemporary, I don't know how to put this one, is my own thinking. When I started thinking about the myth, when I was watching the Pacific Ocean, there are 2 things that I remembered. That the women had no brothers, and it's never really been a an issue before.
Mm.
So it occurred to me that these women must have been doing everything themselves. They had no brothers to rely upon or to say, this is a man's work, this is a woman's work. No. They had to know how to build houses. They had to know how to hunt or to cultivate. They had to know how to make things. So I was struck by, wait a minute, in this very myth of origins, we have women as a union, creative union of the mind, hands, and body, so to speak, right? And that's, and then I said to myself, like, oh my God, this must be the original feminists, yeah? So a combination of all those things may have triggered the
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that phrase, the original feminists, in terms of how self-reliant these women are. They have complete agency over their lives, over the men that they choose to live with, and all of the skills that they have. It's like you wouldn't normally think that these are women's skills about building houses or creating their own clothes. But I wanted to ask you, connected to that, and then the 9 women also create the 9 Gikuyu clans.
Yes,
So
they are the
they have a very
matriarchs,
important role. But in terms of that, I wanted to ask you to comment on the centrality of women, of females, in Gikuyu society, and the roles that they have to play, maybe even in contemporary times.
First of all, let me say, Gikuyu women,
Mm.
like, may I say, all women in the world, or say woman in the world, they do one thing that no man I know has been able to do, that is carry each one of us, whether we are man or female, for a good 9 months. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that in itself already makes woman the central vehicle of life, really. And because no man would no male I know of, even the bravest or the strongest or the he had a woman carry him for 9 months. And that's very important. Actually, it comes across in the epic, by the way, this recognition of the centrality of woman in that respect. But also historically, in our society that I know of, women have played a very important role. They may not always be remembered in history books, but in real history, like in our struggle against the British colonial settler regime, they were everywhere, in the rural areas, mountains fighting. Some of them were jailed, in concentration camps and so on, So we have even individual women, we have very strong women in our history. They are not always recognized as such. And that's why I think the perfect 9 is also important in that recognition, But my mother, for instance, let me just put it this way. My mother played apart from carrying me for 9 months, but she also played a very central role in my own education. Although I say she could not read or write, but she sent me to school and followed that with very penetrating questions, and encouragements, and always asking me whether what I had done was actually the best that I could have done. So she implanted the idea of the best in me. So, I mean, I am because my mother was. Right, yeah.
Right. Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
even in the play that you and Michere Mugo wrote together, The Trial of
mm,
Dedan Kimathi, we had
mm,
the strong character of the woman
mm,
and, the links that the women provided to the fighters in the
yeah,
mountains and,
yeah,
the ways in which they continued the struggle was very important.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
yeah, it's actually, that's really reflects what happened historically, in Kenya. And in that sense, I'm glad if the perfect nine reflects that centrality of
Mhm.
woman in our society and in our lives. Yeah. Mm,
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one of the major contributions, of the
mm,
epic itself. And you think about worldwide, many of the women who have played important roles are invisible, in the history books, as you said. So
yes.
it's always an effort to excavate,
Uh,
to bring
mm,
these stories back to light and
mm,
for people to kind of learn to
mm.
recognize the roles that they have
Yeah,
played.
yeah. I said that's very important.
Mm,
Uh, I appreciate the fact that many of the commentaries on the epic have
mm,
so far, nearly all of them have pointed out the centrality of these women in the
mhm.
narrative. Yeah, yeah,
Right. Right. So just going back to the epic, I mean, I think Jason also pointed out from the New Yorker, I also regard your work in this verse epic,
uh,
as kind of in line with the major epics of the world. So you already mentioned the Mahabharata and how that has fascinated you. We've had
mm,
some
mm,
conversations about that, with
right.
the Iliad and the Odyssey
Mm,
and other cultures like Icelandic epics or even the
yeah.
Persian epics,
Oh, I
Uh,
should have mentioned how much there was a period actually at my first year at UCI. Actually, for some reason, I discovered Icelandic or rediscovered Icelandic, epics, and I
yes,
used to really read them over and over again because there they have some, oh my God, incredible.
yeah,
They
right.
have incredible women characters, by the way. Yeah, right. Yeah,
Yes, yes.
yeah.
And I think working with the International Center for Writing and Translation when you were the director, I
Mm.
think we had some Icelandic poets also invited to UC Irvine. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, that's my Icelandic period, so to
yeah.
speak. Yeah, right.
And then I just wanted to mention that from the Caribbean, from St. Lucia, Derek Walcott, he did his own adaptation of Homer in his long verse poem called Omeros. And that came out in 1990, and then he won the Nobel Prize in 1992. So
What is
I'm still
what what
rooting.
are, what are you suggesting, Professor?
Very, very open suggestion to everyone who's listening, that you have been in
Yeah,
the running for the Nobel Prize for a long time,
yeah,
and perhaps
yeah.
with this epic,
Mm.
it might happen.
Maybe
Uh,
epic might be the route to that.
yes. But I think that
Yeah.
maybe you want to also share your amazingly philosophical
Uh,
interpretation when you describe the Nobel of the heart.
yeah.
I love how you describe. Maybe you want to tell the audience about
No,
that.
what I think is this Nobel Prize is obviously important, and it's good to remember. I mean, all those who have had it have earned it, and this is important. Walla Shenka was the first Black African to get that honor. And
Mhm.
there are others, from Africa, three of them from Africa who have had that, prize and all over the world. And that's very good. I mean, I congratulate them, all. But then I remember there are also other writers whom I like very much who never got the Nobel Prize. Yeah.
Mm,
Tolstoy, for instance,
mm,
one of the biggest, I mean, sort of greatest novelists or writers in the history of literature.
mm.
Yeah, he didn't get it. On the other hand, some other people whose I have no idea why they got it, like Churchill. I mean, he was a historian more than he was a literary person. Now, So, but this is not to devalue the honor, is very important, But I also say there's another thing which is also for me equally important. And that is, like once I visited India for the first time, and I've met a person there who is quite active politically, who said that, who told me, he didn't have to tell me this, but he told me that he was actually thinking of committing suicide. Oh. And he happened to enter a bookshop, where our friend is, and he started fingering my book, Devil on the Cross, the one I wrote in prison. And this apparently struck him so much. I mean, I don't know how it struck him in but it gave him, he told me himself, it gave him a new leash of life, and his interest in activism on behalf of the masses began with reading that particular book. So I call that kind of reaction the Nobel of the heart, because it comes from the heart. When you meet somebody and they tell you, I was thinking about this, then I read your book and this happened to me, that's really very, very special. But I also like the Nobel of the Heart for another reason. It's very democratic because it's available to every writer. And every writer knows, has encountered that Nobel of the Heart at one time or another, right? Yeah.
Right.
So it's very attractive in every possible way, But it's not to demean the other one. It's also equally important, and yeah.
Sure.
And if the epic is a way of getting it, then be it so.
Maybe that's a lucky charm. Who knows?
Yeah, right. Yeah, thank you.
But I also love the idea of the democratic nature of any writer who gets that kind of appreciation.
Yeah, people get that reaction. That's a Nobel. They are conferring him or her the Nobel of the Heart. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I have another question about the epic, and then after that, perhaps you might like to read from it. So this is a question also connected to the democratic impulse that you just talked about, and that is to do with the spirituality in the epic, which, the way I read it, it's different from like religion where you have rules and regulations and rituals and so on. But the spirituality, like the supreme giver, as you call him in the text, it's a very open-ended and very tolerant, creating unity among people of different kind of faiths. So I just wanted you to elaborate on this notion of spirituality.
I'll come to spirituality, but let me tell you a few things which I added to the original narrative. They're quite interesting. In the original myth, the Gikuyu goes to the mountain, and if the following day he just gets exact number 9 to 10. But I know also Gikuyu people, when something happens, they don't say I did it. They say God made me do it, or God did it for me, right? Or if something happens which is good, they say thank God, it's God who has brought it about. Okay, so I assumed now there was more to the 9 young men appearing than the statement that God brought them there. But how did he bring them? That's my addition, And I imagined the beauty of these 9, 10 daughters spreading across the continent. And you see this beauty in their dreams, okay? And each one of them leaves their own home in pursuit of the dream of perfect beauty. But then he finds on the way, there are many others who are also on the same search, okay? So only 99 managed to get to the mountain of the moon. But 99 are too many for the 10, right?
Right.
So they are given a task, and the task is this. One, to get the nature of the task, let me put it this way. One of the girls, 9, one who makes 10, actually is a grown woman like others, but she has very weak legs. So she crawls, okay? She doesn't walk upright, she walks. And there's one thing which can cure that, and that is a hair that grows in the middle of the tongue of an ogre, man-eating ogre. And this ogre is invisible. You cannot tell where it is, its size, or when it's going to strike. So they have to come back with this hair because it will help in probably healing the legs of the 10th daughter, okay? So that's, so the 99 men and women, and by the way, and the girls have to accompany them so that they can judge for themselves the character of whomever they fall in love with, okay? Yeah, so that's was my own addition of the 99 men and women. And the tasks they are given, or the dangers they encounter, including this one of invisible foe. And let me tell you, people, this was written before the corona. Okay, yeah, this invisible foe. And the secret of how, well, I won't tell you the secret of how they do it, but when they come to kind of, they have, how do they overcome a foe they cannot see? The one thing they have to work together. Yeah, but I will not say more than that. Yeah, about that.
You don't want to give it away. Yeah.
And so you're asking what the
about the spirituality.
Oh yeah, spirituality. Now one of the which is found by the mythologies, Mahabharata, Homer, Greek mythologies, I mean Icelandic, Norse mythologies, is consciousness of the unity of the human and nature. Okay, you find characters, how human characters interact with their environment. Sometimes they can even transform, like metamorphosis of what's with the Greek, is what the Greek word, the metamorphosis.
Yeah.
And in metamorphosis, people actually do, you've had a girl running, and then by the time before you catch her, she has turned into a tree, or some other, or a gazelle or something, and you find a similar thing in Mahabharata, where people, there's a woman who is born out of a fish, and she becomes the mother of one of the most active participants in the epic, Mahabharata, for instance, so that conscious nature, very important. And then in our own stories, Gikuyu stories, real ones, I was told, well, okay, let me tell you, my mother, you went to the shamba or the fields, my mother, and you pulled one tree, you had to plant another one in that same spot or near that same spot, okay? So many stories, not just African, of pre-capitalist social formations all over the world, they are very conscious of the unity of the human nature. And by the way, Ketu, they are right. In this way, humans, nature, if you like, can do without the human, but the human cannot do without nature. We cannot do without the air we breathe. the water we drink, even the very earth on which that makes us be able to walk, okay, or to build houses, right? We depend on the earth for everything. So it's ridiculous for the capitalist mindset, which is the nature of the civilization we have now, where the human thinks he or she can do without nature, or, and it's not, it's not true.
Right.
We are all equally dependent on nature. And when we ruin the air, the waters, or whatever, we're doing something which is, I don't know what, devilish, right? Whereas the other one is closer to the spiritual, right? The spiritual in life, the spiritual in the environment, the spiritual in the human, okay? The spiritual in that connection between us and how our lives are very dependent on the small insects that break the air and create oxygen in the soil, or the bee that helps in cross-fertilization, right? I mean, all those things. But capitalism tells us, as long as you chase profit, it does not matter how many people die in your chase of the increasing rate of profit. It does not matter how many trees you destroy, how much water you spoil, or air, or things like that. So the prophet is very conscious of that connection with nature, and the original father, Gikuyu, and they always tell their daughters about environment, about trees, about animals, about water, about, not to take them for granted. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a beautiful way to think about spirituality, like the animism in nature and every living creature that, we have on Earth, along with the humans. But as I said, nature can survive without people, but we cannot survive without nature.
Yeah.
So that's a very powerful, message for us to think about in terms of where we are now, with the environment and how we are abusing all kinds of, the earth, water, and many other natural sources.
Right. In the past, the mother Mũmbi is always talking to her daughters about that. They tell them how they survived the journey to the mountain and the moon, and so they are always stressing that mutuality of human and the natural environment. Yeah.
Right. And I just want
and spirituality relies in that consciousness of mutual dependency between human and another human, like in the Bantu saying, I am because you are. But the same can be extended to nature. We are because nature is, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that your epic brings that out really beautifully,
Yeah.
And it shows that sort of unification, or how human beings can work with nature, with kind of not enmity, but with harmony. And that is a mutually beneficial kind of reality.
Yes, yeah. So that's to me very, very important. And as I said, you find that recognition in nearly all mythologies, actually. That's
absolutely.
The
only thing is that I was going to just bring up that since you have really been fascinated with the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita, the religious doctrine that a lot of the Hindus follow, it's a philosophical and a kind of religious text. But in that text, there is a huge hierarchy of human beings, and that's sort of rooted in the Hindu caste system. And there are a lot of moral dilemmas about how certain actions are taken up where the ends of the actions are rather dubious, So it
Yeah.
does assert that unity that, your epic does for me.
No, true, there's hierarchy, but we cannot take whatever mythology tell us literally, right? I don't think, for instance, being the mother of what's that family called? The very in the Mahabharata, yeah, Pandavas, yeah. I don't think she was born literally from the fish,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Any more than I think in the Bible, the biblical story of Jonah surviving in the belly of the fish,
Right. Right.
until he vomited out on the other side where he was sent by God. I don't take it, for me, I don't take it literally. So in the same way, you see, the hierarchy we find in nature is really one of equal give and take.
Right.
Even if you see a tree which is very big, is very dependent on small, and there's something which that big tree is doing and giving back to the environment. So that's, yeah. So this, but of course, hierarchy is a human invention. By that I mean human in the sense that it's not, when we say I am because you are, that's mutual. Yes. We're talking about mutuality, right?
Yes.
Is a relation of give and take, equal give and take. I am because you are, right? Okay, yeah. But of course, alongside religions, of course, comes social systems that are some against the very spirituality, which is implied, in the in the mythology of that very, society. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I would love for you to read something from the epic, and if you would like to share something, a song in Gikuyu for our audience. And then after that, I wanted to talk a little bit about language, but we don't want to run out of time. So I wondered if you would please read something.
Okay. If you talk about language, then that means I can stay here for the next 5 hours.
Yeah, I know, that's what I want you to read first.
No, I often, the epic, and by the way, the epic is, as I said, originally written in Gikuyu language as Keda Muyuru. And it came out in Kenya, I think, 1.5 years ago or something, anyway, before the corona anyway, it was out. And it's been selling quite well. The publisher are surprised, that it could sell about 2,500 copies within the first 1 year, 1.5 years. So, yeah, this goes against those who say, oh, a book written in an African language cannot sell, but yeah. So this one, the English translation, The Perfect Nine, came out in October this year. Yeah. I did my own translation though. Yeah. And it begins by telling how the original man and woman, Gikuyu and Mũmbi, they just travel from some danger, not always defined, from some momentous event somewhere else. So they are searching for the perfect land, so to speak, and that's why they learn many things, because they have to depend on each other. The Gikuyu has been on Mũmbi, and Mũmbi has been on him anyway. Yeah, and then nature around them. That's how their own journey to the mountain is almost an educational journey at the mountain. Okay, they pass many lands before they get to Mount Kenya, and when they get there, they just stop. Say, look, mountain or the moon. The landscape around it was beautiful. And for a moment, they were at a loss for words to describe the undulating plains that spread out before them, or the hills and valleys that hedged them in, or the rivers that flowed through the green lilies and reeds. Countless animals of different shapes and colors bent low over the waters, drinking and lowing and grunting and roaring in delight. Others strutted about the banks or simply basked in the sun. Gikuyu and Mũmbi turned to each other and murmured something. They were captives to their wonder. And then they resumed gazing at the peaceful green land below. Then they stretched forth their arms in grateful reverence. We receive this with all our hearts, O giver supreme, they said in unison. Thank you, owner of the ostrich whiteness, for this land which you have given us, our children and our children's children. Yeah. And they say, and then they get a bit of the moon white around them, and it's splattered in different directions, each time saying, they turn to the north, to the east, to the west, and they say, peace, glory to thee, give us supreme, peace. Then they turn to the east, the land of the rising sun, peace, glory to thee, give us supreme, peace. And last, the west, the land of the setting sun, peace, glory to thee, give us supreme, peace. And suddenly they felt their souls stir and soar with joy. They recalled other places they had journeyed through, beautiful like this, but they had not been taken up in the same way. And now, all the beauty they had left behind has reappeared tenfold for them to reap. More gratitude to the giver spring welled up inside them, and they broke into hymn of praise. Mwene nyaga etwakogada, yoda koyo adera take, terioyo yoe naide manyinge, ona nyamo milemba minge. Twadikereria, taiwa magambo, wakungayo getwerate, oda koyo mo benyerere. The last one was thankful. They had a voice, and when they had the voice of the giver supreme telling them that this land which he has shown them, they must take care of it, because everything in it reflects the glory of the supreme, giver supreme. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that was just beautiful also for the audience to hear you speak it in Gikuyu. So before we take the questions, perhaps we can talk just a little bit about language. And you wrote the epic first in Gikuyu. I know years ago you said that you would write all your fiction in Gikuyu, and then thankfully for the English readers, you would translate it yourself into English. And that happened in prison when you took that decision. You wrote the novel Devil on the Cross in Gikuyu, and then it was translated. And since then, Wizard of the Crow, a monumental novel that you wrote first in Gikuyu and then translated into English, and now the epic. So I know that language is a question very dear to your heart, mother tongues. When I worked with you at the International Center for Languages, you were very passionate about how we work to promote mother tongues, how we promote translations. So maybe you could share a few ideas with the audience.
Yes, what I've been quite, okay, you're quite right. The language thing struck me even more strongly, if you like, when in December 31st, 1977, I was arrested by the Kenya government and put in a maximum security prison for having participated and being one of the authors of the play I'll Marry When I Want in Gikuyu Gahikadeda. And we wrote it originally in Gikuyu, and it was performed by literally the small farmers, peasants, and factory workers and plantation workers, literally, and it was very, very successful in terms of audiences and demand and so on. And the Kenya government just arrested me punitively and put me in a maximum security prison. So how did the idea of that language come into my being imprisoned? One, I started thinking, how come that if a Gikuyu speaking president, right, was among one who sent me to prison for writing in Gikuyu, right, an African language, right? Then I started thinking, I started thinking, my God, the role of language in colonial domination, right? Everywhere, there's a colonial thing. The languages of the colonized were literally either wiped out or subordinated to the colonial one. And some of these thoughts are the ones which years later would make the book Decolonizing the Mind. But I also said, now from now onwards, I will not be writing my fiction, novels, and printing or plays, especially plays, in English. I'll be writing them in the language which was the basis of my incarceration, okay? So that's why I wrote that novel, on toilet paper called, Shaitan Mudarafaine, or translated as Devil on the Cross. And I've continued my poetry, now the epic play have now been in Gikuyu language only. Essays, academic essays, and my memoirs have been in English, but otherwise the rest of my writing largely has been in Gikuyu. I've not retreated since. But I did come to think about languages in Ireland, what the Irish language was done, was how it was decimated or weakened. I looked at Native American languages, how they were similarly, subordinated to English. How the Maori language in New Zealand again, where people were actually beaten to bleed to their bodies bleeding when they were caught speaking Maori in a school compound, right? Same in Australia, it's everywhere. So it become, so now today, I'm totally opposed to languages relating to each other in terms of hierarchy. And I keep on saying, there is no language which is more of a language than any other. That every language has its own musicality, and there's one who can say its musicality is somehow more musical than the musicality of any other language, even if spoken by a few people. They can play the same melody, but their musicality, like musical instruments, we have the piano with guitar, with the violin, and another instrument all over the world. And we don't say, I like the piano is a higher musicality. It must be, we must abolish all the other musical instruments and leave the piano alone or only, or the guitar, okay? each language, even if spoken by, has its own musicality, unique to itself. But that music also carries memory, the knowledge system of the environment, and many other things at the same time, okay? Note that with musical instruments, when they come together, the guitar and the piano can come together and they create orchestra or quartet or whatever, right? And harmony, right? Mm. But they don't, musical instruments don't meet each other in terms of hierarchy. That maybe, even though I play guitar and piano together, the guitar is not important, right? Right? Yeah. So languages are in the same way. Each language has its musicality, unique to itself. English has, French has, Russian, so has Yoruba, is Zulu, Gikuyu, Sanskrit, Hindi, Gujarati, I mean, Mandarin, Japanese, and all these languages. Why put them in hierarchical relation to each other? Why not let them meet on the basis of equal give and take? And that's where translation comes in, which I normally describe as the language of languages. Because I say it's a language, it's a common language of all languages, because any one language can be translated into another. They may not be to capture the musicality of the original. That's not possible. That's unique to that language, right? But they may try to capture the spirit of the other one in the musicality of, say, English or Gujarati, or Hindi, so on. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And this is such an important question that faces really the world, because issues of small publishers, trying to get ahead, publishing in languages that may not have a big market. And yet, you need to have governments that can foster that, so that even you also talked about intra-regional translations, like Africa, the whole continent. If Kiswahili or Gikuyu translated into Yoruba or into Zulu, those kinds of connections would be so unique for human beings.
Yeah, I think there's a world in front of all of us when there's mutual translation from one language into another and so on, and another saying which I have to say here is what I say, that monolingualism is the carbon monoxide of cultures, and multilingualism is the oxygen of cultures. And you can see, no matter which language, the tendency for languages literally is to split into many. Even English language and its regional variations, the tendency is to split into many. But authority try to say, no, don't split into many, let's be uniform. Instead of allowing the two things to be there simultaneous, where a language can both grow, connect to the languages, but also can be a structure which allows communication across the different languages and so on. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, you have rightly been called a language warrior, and this is definitely important, a very important issue to you, and really for our audience, to think about some more.
Because I came to realize, initially when I was writing decolonizing the mind, I used to think it was a European colonial and African. Okay, I didn't realize it was. I started thinking about it. I thought, my God, this is what was done to India. This was done to Native American. This was done to Irish, for instance, was done to all over. Whenever one people have conquered another, the first thing they do is to suppress the language of the conquered and impose the language of the conqueror on them, okay? So that the language of the conqueror becomes a measure of intelligence and even even spirituality. You can't speak to God until you speak English, And in heaven, people will be speaking English or French, right? So the assumption being, oh, even God, actually, even God speaks English. So somehow or other, even Adam and Eve were speaking English or French. and,
Right. Just
and
the
it's not,
colonial.
it's, yeah, and it's, it's not true, it's not true.
Yeah. I mean, it's part of the colonial domination. You're right.
Mm.
Languages are the first things that are attacked and suppressed,
Yeah.
and then the colonizer's language gains a lot of power. in
Yeah, a
terms
lot
of
of
getting
power.
ahead. Yeah.
Which
Um,
I always keep on saying that when we change to things, I've come by writing in Gikuyu, in some ways I've come to appreciate writers like Shakespeare and Dickens more, or Tolstoy, because the challenge which I meet in writing my own language, I find they had met similar languages in their own language and see what I come to now to value more what they produced. Particularly some of those writers like Rabelais in the case of French, or not this Rabelais, or some of those writers like Shakespeare. I find them, or in Spanish, the one who wrote Don Quixote, for
Right.
instance.
Right.
Now I find them amazing, and I really enjoy them in a different way from when I was reading them from the point of view of these masters, this English as this. But when I come to see English met similar challenges like any other language, and I can see what some of the writers did with that language, then for me it becomes inspiring for me to do similar thing in Gikuyu. Yeah.
Right. That's amazing. So I think in the time we have left, maybe I should just take a look at the questions that have been posed.
Okay.
Yeah, I have to apologize for the notifications that come in through my email and they're making a sound. I'm so sorry, I don't know how to switch that off. Okay, there's a question here about other African epics that may have influenced your own. That's one question. And another question is, are you suggesting that the idea of mutuality and codependence between humans and nature is intrinsic to the epic form?
I'm not sure, but it has happened that in the epic form, because they come from community, I guess because because many epics are pre-capitalist. They are capitalism is the one which author hierarchy, profit, the rising rate of profit becomes the thing people choose, property, accumulation of property, whether you got 10 houses and you must think you're not satisfied unless they are 12, and you get 12, you're not satisfied until they are 14, you got one car, it's not satisfied, you need 3 or 4, and a boat, and an aeroplane, and a part. Now, pre-capitalist societies as a whole, pre-capitalist societies were dependent on each other anyway. Mutual dependence was very important. Neighborliness was something real, right? Now, in the suburbs of today, neighborliness has almost no meaning, literally. You are next to each other, but you don't know each other. Right? Remember, in most pre-capitalist social formations, people, even if they don't see you for a couple of days, pass by your door and ask, hi, how are you? I was just checking in you. Sit down, have a cup of tea. And then, if they get too much harvest, they shared it with people around them. It was second nature to, but capitalism, the more you have, even though you can, I get fun, in thinking, you can note, you can only, at least the Wizard of the Crow, where someone is wondering, he's wondering about this accumulation because he wonders that you can, no, I think it's in one of my novels anyway, where they talk about, he gets so wealthy, and yet he finds one meal satisfies him like any other person, okay? And he can only wear one pair of clothes at any one time. And yet he's more. He could wear 20 trousers at the same time, but he cannot, right? Yeah. So that one is more of a capitalist thing. Capitalism is driven by profit. And does not matter even if you kill your father or your mother or your whatever it is. It does not matter if you tell people, don't worry about COVID, just go out, don't wear masks, it's taking away your time from the factory, right?
Yeah.
That a thinking which is not consonant with ethics, I don't think. You look at all epics, that mutual dependence, that mutual care, that mutual understanding that we depend on each other and on the environment is very much governs a lot of behavior in our society. Yeah.
Right. And talking about corporations and, capitalism, I've just wanted to let the audience know about your volume of essays called Global Ethics, The Politics of Knowing, which also includes some of the issues about language, also includes issues about globalization and, the kind of world that we live in now in terms of literature and culture. So it's a wonderful collection of essays that you might want to look up, also by Ngũgĩ.
Yeah.
So the one question was about if there were any African epics
that
yes. influenced your thinking about epics.
Sudiata, I think, for instance, Sudiata, I read this a long time ago, but it must have influenced me a little bit in the conception of the character, one of the characters, Waringa. Well, not Waringa, but Warigia in the epic, the girl who is the body of a grown-up, but that of a child, I think Sudiata, one of them, was similarly born with a defect. And how they the part of the epic is also how they overcome the challenge, if you like. I don't know, let me not call it defect, but let me call it challenge. And they become these heroic figures, yeah, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, let me see if we covered any other questions from the audience. I think we've covered most of them. I didn't quite understand this question. What did revision look like for this epic?
Translation.
Well, it says revision. So I think you talked about how you added things to the original story.
Oh, yeah. No. Yeah, I like to call it interpretation, but what's interesting about myths, or there are things you have to work within a framework of, that many of the features of that epic are told. As I said, for instance, I cannot add to the daughters of Mũmbi, right? People say, oh, no, it's not true. Right? I cannot alter the fact that there was Gikuyu and Mũmbi, right? They will say, oh, no. People will not accept it, Yeah. But whatever you do, you stay. You can alter the story of Jesus Christ, but you can't alter the one fact which every Christian believes in, that he was crucified on a cross. If you leave that out, then we say, oh, no, you're not talking about.
Right. Yeah. So
there are some things, there are some things you have to keep, but you can interpret them differently. That's a key. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The person who asked the question says, how did the work change over time as it was written? So you know the story, but then in your own interpretation, you added a few things within the
Yeah,
framework.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And she is asking what? Sorry.
Yeah, I think that you answered the question. Yeah. The question was, how did the revision work and how did the work change over time?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's in that sense. By the way, even when stories of these mythologies are told,
Mm,
many versions begin to emerge. For instance, uh, take the case of the Greek drama, for instance. All those playwrights used to work on the same myths, but they produced
different
very
story.
different plays.
Yeah.
Sometimes the characters would have the same names,
Mhm.
but really they do incredibly different things. Yeah.
Right.
Even Mahabharata, I think, has different versions.
Yeah, and it's written over centuries too. It's
Yeah.
to pin down a time for
Hmm.
some of the epics. So that
Yeah.
also makes them change a little bit.
Yes, yeah.
over
And
time.
a lot
Yeah.
of it used to be orally transmitted. So
Yes.
as you told the story, you also, there's a way in which you'd emphasize certain things
Mhm.
rather than others and so on. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's another thing I thought would attract you to the epic form as an oral kind of storytelling tradition. So you've written about orality and how
Yeah,
important that is, within African cultures. Uh,
yeah. I
yeah,
think with all cultures, because the orality, or the oral was prior to the written. Huh?
yeah, yeah,
The written tries to, writing science try to imitate uh, the spoken, right?
yes.
You know, we make signs, but those signs are supposed to create the oral. I mean, yeah,
The sound of
yeah,
what
the
it sounds
sound.
like.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Mm.
yeah, right. So I think we don't have any other questions. Um, I had one question to ask you about the number nine. Since you called it the perfect nine,
Oh, yeah.
whether the number nine has any kind of special meaning within Gikuyu culture, because within the Indian culture, nine is a very powerful, mystical
Uh,
number,
uh,
and even multiples of nine, like 18,
uh,
is very important. There are 18 chapters in the Mahabharata, there are 18 chapters in the Bhagavad Gita, and there are many other things that connect to nine, like nine primary emotions, nine major planets, and so on, So I was
oh,
just curious whether nine had any particular significance
I,
within Kenyan
I,
culture.
I don't think so. I can't think of. I, apart from the fact that we have 9 clans or 10 clans,
Right.
because we got 9 or full 9, which is
Mhm.
10,
Right.
right? But I don't think as a number, I may be wrong, but I don't think it is. When I was growing up, I didn't think it had a particular significance apart from its significance as the 9 clans
Okay.
or the 9 daughters of Gikuyu and Mũmbi. Yeah.
Right.
Uh, but when I was writing, though, the epic, I'm not a poet. Let me
You are a poet.
let me first of all say that. So the epic is my first attempt at verse, really. And the way I thought, I didn't want to worry about rhymes that come from the end, the words at the end rhyming, but I use the word, the number 9 and 10 interchangeably and multiples of those, or like, for instance, I'd have sometimes some lines are some lines are 9 9 or 10 10
Mm.
or 5 5 or 3 3, right? I mean, I played around this, and some lines I try to, in Gikuyu, I try to the length would be about 10 syllables. Eh?
Mm.
I use the structure of the 9 daughters and 10 also to help me structure the epic. It did
Right.
not always work, but when it was worked, it was actually quite interesting. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm sure
yeah,
quite exciting because you do
yeah,
use the threes, the Trinity, the past,
Yeah.
present, future, and 3, 3, and 3 is 9 also.
Yeah, and 3, 3, yeah. There's where I talk about the Trinity, the three. When I look at everything and I see there's a threesome in most things, and I was struck. This is not something I've been thought about, but when I was talking about Trinity, it made me remember the Egyptians had organized their entire system in terms of threes. Huh? Their gods were always three, you know, largely God the mother, God the father, and often an only child. Yeah. And I suspect Christianity may have borrowed from the Egyptians because the idea of Trinity was ingrained in Egyptian religious system and outlook. And the idea of an only son was nearly always there. And the idea of resurrection, the idea of resurrection really was part of Egyptian belief system anyway. And they build these tombs, you know, as to ensure successful resurrection of the occupants, that kind of thing. Yeah. So ideas of resurrection, the idea of father, mother, son, only son, you know, that idea of Trinity was very much there. But then I found out the Trinity in most things we do. The Trinity of day, you know, morning, noon, you know, evening, or evening, midnight, so, you know.
Right.
Yeah, three. Yeah, Trinity.
Right. Well, thank you so much. I think that Jason said we could sort of end after an hour or whenever we like. It's an hour and 15 minutes. So I don't think there are any other
maybe when you, okay, I'll challenge, maybe when you have read The Perfect Nine, we can always come back.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good thing.
Yeah, whenever there we can always come back, and then you'll have, you know, thoughts that have come through after reading, right? Yeah, so it's a challenge for people to go and read, then we gather again and talk about it. Great. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Okay, Jason has put the link in the chat so people can order the book from the bookstore that he's put down.
Right.
And I guess we can thank Jason, Andy, and just...
yeah, and to remind people, the idea of the invisible foe, that came before the corona. So
yes.
So, it's the invisible enemy whom they could not see, you know, and they could only, you read, you write about this invisible enemy and how our foe and how they were able to overcome. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Yeah. Enjoy.